It's always exciting when you get hands on a new camera for any photographer, really. These 4 photographers are amongst some of the first to shoot with the Z6III out and about in the field. It's incredible to see how they use the camera, try the new features, and put it to the test.
It just feels so familiar in your hands. The sizes are compromising the practicality of it. I love it. I love it. I love it so much.
The electronic viewfinder is super bright and has a nice contrast range that really helps me. I like it. It's really nice.
So I'm just playing around with the camera. I saw new features. The feeling is really great. All the menus are really good.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. It's been so easy just to pick up and start shooting. The focusing is exceptional.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Nikon Sessions. I'm joined by 4 wonderful creators, all a part of the Nikon family. And there's one really cool thing about all of you, which is that you're some of the first photographers to have hands-on shooting with the Nikon Z6III. So I'd really like to just start with some of the introductions. Just tell us a bit about what you do and who you are. And then we're going to start talking about how this camera's been working for you over the past few days. Rachel, we'll start with you.
So my name is Rachel Bixby. I am a wildlife photographer specialising in seabirds and, as you mentioned, a Nikon creator.
So my name is Shao. I'm a dance photographer, specializing in action, so I can also do sports.
I'm Danny. I'm a photographer from London. And I do mostly commercial sports photography, lifestyle.
My name is Jan Vincent Kleine. I'm an expedition documentary photographer, originally from Germany, now mostly living in Sweden.
You are some of the first people that have been able to shoot with the Nikon Z6III. I would just love some of your kind of first initial reactions. What were your first thoughts when you were handed this camera for the first time? Is there a process you normally go through when you get a new camera, or do you just kind of open your mind and see what it does?
I think for me it was to immediately check out the focus and the autofocus. Working with birds, that has to be really good. And it was the first thing I checked when I got my hands on this camera.
What was your first impression then?
It was fantastic. I was fortunate enough to photograph one of my favourite birds to begin with, and I noticed no difference at all in comparison to my Z9, so I was really pleased from the get-go.
My first instinct is to check the positioning of the buttons, and this is it just reminded me so much of the Z9. There was absolutely no difference to me, you know, like everything felt super familiar. Yeah.
Like all fingers automatically fell into place.
Yeah, I just knew where to go without even having to look.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think Z6 was the first mirrorless camera I ever had, the first version. And I was really excited to see if like the new version has all the features that has in the Z8 or Z9, because that's the cameras that I use right now.
When I first had it in my hand, what struck me first, before checking any autofocus or anything, is really how it felt in the hand. Because with a Z6, Z7, I always felt like the body, at least for my hands, everyone's hands is slightly different. The body always felt a tiny bit too small. So I always had to put the pinky, this is the pinky finger, right? The pinky underneath the body to hold it properly. And this one is ever so slightly larger. Like it's still a small camera, but it's ever so slightly larger so that I can grip it with my entire hand, which I find very comfortable. And also I have a feeling that the grip got deeper. So you can hold it like with a much firmer grip, which I feel like when you're, I don't know, in warmer climates, when you're starting to sweat, when you have to swirl the camera around, it's just really nice to have a proper grip on something and not to feel like you have to really hold on tight in order to not drop it somewhere.
I feel like also the thing that made me so happy was the flip out screen.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I used to have that in my old Nikon cameras, and it was so useful for lower angles, for video, you know, especially now shooting vertical. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely, to me personally, I really love that. Yeah.
When 3 years ago the Z9 came out, and then 2 years later, 1.5 years later, the Z8, that felt very similar. You know, just essentially the same feature set, but in a substantially smaller body. And now the body has become even smaller, but it still feels like the basic ergonomics feels pretty much exactly the same between them, which I feel is especially handy if you're in the lucky position to own, for whatever reason, various bodies.
When I do music photography, I always find like I need 2 bodies that are very identical. And when I was shooting it, I wasn't even thinking like, where's this, where's that, you know, it was just there.
You know, I'm currently, hiking through Norway. and just having something smaller and lighter, if you have to carry it for like prolonged days, is actually like a massive benefit, I feel. So even if you have access to a Z8 or Z9, sometimes it can be handy to just go to the smaller body if you feel like it's capable enough. And I certainly feel like for almost all situations it is.
It's definitely noticeable that all of you are Z8 and Z9 shooters, and all of you are here saying that this kind of fits into that same category of camera, right? You could definitely, if you do needed a 2-camera setup, you could have a choice of 2 of those that would give you really good flexibility when it comes to shooting 2 cameras, right?
But you know, like, well, I was really surprised about the response of the viewfinder. It was really like the latency has been really improved from the version that I had before. So even as shooting subject, you know, I'm shooting action, I need a fast response. But even you, like, you've been testing it on like animals and birds. You know, you need to be really having a little fast response. So how did you feel? Like, do you feel a big difference between the Z9? Like, because birds actually can fly faster than humans.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about that?
I think echoing everything you've all said, especially when I had the battery grip on the Z6III this week, I didn't realise that I wasn't using my Z9 because there was no noticeable difference when I was photographing the birds. There weren't times where I was struggling to focus. There weren't times where I was struggling to achieve what I would achieve with the Z9. And as we will come to the conclusion, you take to the camera so naturally, the muscle memory doesn't have to change, the buttons are in the same place, I hold it the same way as I hold the Z9. And with that in mind, it just makes my job so much easier, and the same as you all, because you're up against it with really unpredictable factors. So you need your camera to be providing the very best that it can to make your life easier. And being able to just pick up the Z6III and go right into the wilderness and work with the same animals that I work with in the UK, I'm able to compare the two and see that there's really very little difference at all.
The moment you look through it, when you do quick pans with the electronic viewfinder or something, or if you have the autofocus, track eyes around, it feels like almost distinguishable to the Z9 experience.
And whilst we're talking about the viewfinder as well, what I found incredibly useful and very, very good this week is the brightness of the viewfinder, because I've been photographing with my sunglasses on almost at all times because I'm focusing on the water which has been hit with the light. And of course, outside of this project, working with snowy conditions and protecting my eyes is so important. And sometimes with a darker viewfinder, it then makes it quite difficult, particularly when my style can be quite abstract and I'm either going really overexposed or really underexposed, and I'm trying to find often a small subject that's moving quite erratically. You know, there's quite a few things that are adding up that with a darker viewfinder and sunglasses makes a bit of a challenge. And this week I've not had that problem at all because of the brightness of the viewfinder.
The Z6III is even brighter than that of the Z9 and the Z8. So even if you are in a really, really bright condition, or if you're shooting through sunglasses, you can make this viewfinder even brighter than the viewfinders we have in Z9 and Z8 as well. So it's definitely something to consider. And we've seen it in the conditions we've been shooting in over the past few days, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The next question I want to ask you about is something that you've all kind of touched on, but you've not really delved really deep into. And I just wanted to ask about autofocus. So you've all been shooting kind of fast, dynamic, moving subjects, everything from birds to breakdancing to parkour. There's lots of different stuff that's been going on. So how have you found that autofocus? Has it made your life easier? Is it more complicated? Is it difficult to try and choose the mode? How's that experience been?
I personally have never tried 3D tracking, anything like that. You know, I've always been a very, single focus, always done that. And I feel like I've been living under a rock, seriously, because after you guys introduced it to me this week, I just couldn't believe how, yeah, it's just so easy. It's just, it allows me to focus on more important things.
Well, what I have liked about the 3D autofocus, the way I had it set up with the Z8 and Z9, is that for 99% of the things that I shoot in my life, I never have to change any autofocus ever again. Shooting an object, pointing at it, it follows it. Pointing it towards a face, it finds the eye. So never do I have to switch around anything. Like if there's a leopard all of a sudden coming around, fits it, finds it. So for me, that was really interesting. I shot it with the 85 1.2, which has this super narrow focus area. And every shot is perfect on the eye.
I normally try quite a few different focusing modes anyway, so that wasn't something that was new this week. But what felt really important was testing the speed of the focus. And there was a time when we were at Bird Island with those amazing gannets, and I was going for a slightly more artistic shot. I was trying to get backlit gannets with lots of bokeh using the Z400 2.8. So shooting into a really high contrast area. The light was changing quite a lot on that day, I found. And especially with the gannets, they have lots of black on the end of their wings and a white body. And when they're flapping to land, they're creating quite a lot of chaos. And the speed of the autofocus didn't fail. And I was really impressed with that. And it makes me feel very confident to use that camera and apply it to the same situations around the world.
On my side, like I really, try to, when I heard like what it was capable of, like trying to focusing at -10 EV and like really low light. So basically what I did is I really try to push the experiments to the highest point, because I'll shoot a lot in low light condition, and also I like to shoot wide open. So it means that, like sometimes if, like the subject has like, let's say the leg in front of you, it could be a bike, it could be any, like a skateboard or whatever, the focus is really important to have the focus on the face, because, we need to recognize the athlete. So basically the first day when I was shooting the skateboarder, I didn't know his tricks, and I was getting familiar to him, and I was just relying on the autofocus. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to have the continuous autofocus, like not even the 3D, but just the autofocus through the eye tracking. And basically, I was surprised that every time, I got the shot, even the skateboard was in front, I have like the pipe was in front of me. So those shots didn't really affect the autofocus. So that was the first test that I did. After the second time, it was the breaker in the water. So, every time I'm trying to see if it was capable of like really track the eye. And when I shoot the breaker at night, it was the same, because I'm really struggling having the autofocus on subject in a low light. So it was working well. I was really surprised about that.
Danny, one of the things that you were doing when you were shooting parkour is that your subject was almost kind of coming out of nowhere. And I thought that was a really good example of how the autofocus system just grabs the subject as soon as they appeared, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There was moments where, he was hiding behind the ledge, so I had no clue when he was coming out. Plus, I was shooting him upside down, and it still recognized his face when he was, all crumbled up in a ball, doing a backflip upside down. It still found the eye.
Danny was shooting pre-release capture, so as soon as he appeared, she got that 1 second before worth of images. But the fact that as soon as he did appear, the camera kind of saw the face meant that those shots that were taken before you even started taking a picture were still in focus, right?
In 30 frames, so a
It's
second
cool
before the photos were taken already. Yeah, it was super cool.
So the Z6III is quite unique in the fact that it has this partially stacked sensor. The Z8 and the Z9 have their fully stacked sensors, and the Z6III has a partially stacked sensor. It's not quite as fast, but it definitely means that it's a much faster camera in that segment of cameras. And you've really already said to me that you've seen that happen in the responsiveness and the frame rate. So just talk to me about how you feel about this camera speed, the frame rates, and how you've been using those.
So rating the frame rate, I mean, it's now it's coming to a 20 frame per second, if you want to shoot raw.
Yeah.
The fact that, I did a couple of shots with like 100 frame per second. It goes to 120, I think.
It does, yeah.
And but I've been pushing it a little bit, but then it's like a lot of photos. But you don't miss exactly, like, if you want to pick really a moment, for example, when an athlete is hitting or just having the takeoff moment, because sometimes the takeoff is important, especially in the parkour.
Yeah.
Pre-release also, you can use this high frame rate in pre-release. It means that, at the takeoff, which sometimes is super aesthetic and super hard to get, you would get that pictures. So I think that those features is really nice to have in this kind of like, for me, it's like a entry-level camera where everybody wants to like start photography, but want to go to like another level, So it offers the capacity that a new kid and young generation comes and be like, okay, I can do whatever a professional photographer can do. I think you tried some slow motion, right?
I did do slow motion, yeah. For my field of photography, like super sky-high frame rates are not very important. But I know that for your guys' work, probably especially Rachel, though, with the wildlife, it's critical maybe.
Yeah, it's very valuable to have as many frames per second as you can, especially when you're looking for perfect symmetry or perfect behavior or the perfect composition. because the animals move so quickly. And although you can do as much research as you can beforehand to predict their behavior and give yourself these clues and indications to hit your shutter, sometimes moments happen, you know, I've had it in the past where they're quite literally fleeting moments. And I am not so reserved when it comes to taking shots. I think it's important to take as many as your camera can allow you to do so that you've got a lovely selection of images to look through. So this is what I really value about the Z6III, is that it's the same shooting in RAW as my Z9, so it's not lacking in that area at all.
I was more into slow motion video, which is sort of similar concept, but entirely different. But sort of the more frames per second you can shoot, the more flexibility you have with a certain outcome. And that I found very impressive, that you like have 4K 120, and from my preliminary look at it, it actually looks really good.
And I tried the 240, and to be honest, I was waiting this for so long. You cannot imagine how I'm in love with slow motion videos. So I tried that, and it was amazing because, you can see an evolution, because, I think all the people from the Nikon family, we all wanted to have a camera that allows to go higher than 120 frames per second.
Absolutely.
So finally.
I think 240 frames is something that you've been playing with as well. Rachel's got some good video content as well. So let's start talking about those video aspects. That 6K RAW capability in camera, the slow motion we've been talking about. How are you finding this camera when it comes to video? Is it just as easy as stills, or is it something that you're still getting used to? Is it something you're comfortable with? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, to me personally, the moment when with the Z9 it started that you can record to the highest standards, all internally without needing to rig the thing to an external recorder, and with all the clumsiness that comes with that, that was definitely a big change.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's just moments where you need video just to convey the story. And I love stills photography, and that will still always be my primary approach to photography. But when we were with gannets and when we were with penguins, and even if it's just a memory for myself, I love just being able to switch to really high quality video just to capture the sound and all of the movement and all of the kerfuffle that is a seabird colony, to really capture that. When you can do it with slow shutters with stills, but I find the video is really precious to have in the camera.
Absolutely, it's just another way of telling that story of what's happening in front of you, right?
I don't know how you feel, but I know we're in the same kind of field of we're doing a lot of commercial sports photography and everything. But nowadays, a lot of company and brands are asking us to deliver stills, but also at the same time, if you can be able to record. Yeah. I mean, and lately I've been asking for a lot of TikTok stuff, So it's it's not my adult things, but because they see how you can manage to deliver a nice vision as a photographer, they would be, can you do the same in the video? So basically, being able to match the market requirement. I think this is really important.
I think that's something that's really important to mention is photographers and to emerging photographers and videographers that watch the Nikon Sessions, is that of course you're always trying to create a career and better your career, and as a result of that you have to follow certain social media trends. And one of the ones we're seeing a lot of at the moment is the rise of video content, especially in wildlife, whether that's TikTok or Instagram Reels, shooting in portrait, and being able to do that at the flick of a switch is a really beneficial tool to help people who might not necessarily want to go into videography, but it helps them to build their online platform and their portfolio and, gain some recognition and start to grow their career from that.
I would be very confident to shoot 99% of the jobs that I do, or anything portfolio or artwork or something, with a Z6III. Quite
clearly, within ranges of cameras in the past, there was very hard stops. If you wanted a specific feature, you had to go and buy one specific camera. And if that wasn't the camera that you were looking at, then you might have to sacrifice on a specific feature. But as we talked about earlier, it does feel like this kind of fits into the same family as the Z8 and the Z9 and still gives you all of those benefits.
For sure.
But just in a smaller camera, right?
I feel like the Z9, as an outsider, it might, if you're a starting photographer and someone gives you the Z9, it's super intimidating.
Yeah.
And this one, it can deliver as well as the Z9, but it's just so much more friendly, you know, and it doesn't look as scary because it's just smaller, and it just like, and then the transition from the Z6III to the Z9, if that transition does happen, it's completely fine, you know, like it's...
You don't have to go and relearn everything again, right?
Not at all.
One thing I really wanted to ask all of you is that you've all effectively come from DSLR, used Nikon DSLRs in the past. Danny, extremely recently, you've only just moved to mirrorless, right?
Yeah.
Do you think now with Z6III and a lot of the technology that we've seen in Z8 and Z9, with the brighter viewfinders, the higher resolution, do you think that everything that you could ever need in a mirrorless camera now exists? And do you think that you don't really need to be shooting DSLR anymore?
To be very honest, I was very apprehensive to move to mirrorless from DSLR. That's why I stuck with it for so long. But, you know, as soon as I started shooting mirrorless with the Z9, I was just so excited, especially for the viewfinder. Because I feel like with the optical viewfinder, it's just a lot of hassle, you know, going to playback, making sure that the photo is correct. Whereas with the mirrorless camera, you know, what you see is what you get. And to me, that just saved me so much time, and it's just so much fun as well. Like,
Rachel, I know that you have a great story about when you transitioned from your D850 to Z9, right?
I thought you might mention that. It's a really similar story to Danny, actually. I was shooting D850 and I loved it with all my heart. I still do. And I was very kindly given the Z9 as part of my creatorship, and I kept the Z9 in its box for 6 or 7 months. And I actually only used it working with Nikon and another assignment in Norway. And if I hadn't have had that assignment, it could still well be in its box because you have such an emotional connection to cameras. They're not not for everyone, but it's not just a tool for me. This was something that was helping me to create the most incredible memories that will last my whole lifetime.
I feel like yesterday I just caught myself in this thought where I was thinking like, damn, imagine 10 years ago thinking that you could look through your viewfinder and thinking that what you see is what you get. Like, I just imagine thinking like, that's insane that we have that now, actually. Like, imagine someone, you know, 10, 20 years ago not having that, and we have that now. That's crazy. That's insane.
I also sometimes, what I sometimes do is with a raw shooting, I put the black and white color profile on, which does not affect the raw file at all. But it gives me, when I'm shooting it, it gives me another feeling. You know, I do see the world different when I look at sort of a black and white outcome already, instead of looking at color and imagining it. So that is also something that I really like, because it's kind of like, sometimes it makes you feel, for lack of a better word, more arty. You know, when you switch it to black and white and you look through it, I see scenes differently, I believe.
So to be honest, like, I had a hard time switching from DSLR to mirrorless because, you know, like when I'm shooting, the timing that I have is small, and all my friends call me one shot because I get a perfect moment. So when I first tried the mirrorless camera, I was kind of disappointed because I was missing shots. The Z6III now having this kind of like corrected latency that really matched the new camera, like the Z8 and Z9. I think that's why, you know, like, I feel it's more efficient than before.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your insight as to being some of the first photographers of trying the Nikon Z6III. We've had a wonderful few days here, and I'm really excited to see all the content that we've put together. I think there's some really amazing stuff that we're going to have for each of you, working together, work on your own individual prompts. I'm really excited to see all the stuff that gets pulled together. So it's definitely been a really great few days working with you all. The questions that you've asked have been amazing about the camera, and hopefully the Z6III has been a camera that's worked incredibly well for you. Definitely from the images that I've seen from that you've been taking, it looks amazing as well. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
No worries. And thank you all as well. And I'll see you in the next Nikon Sessions.